I'm welcoming folks to the third League of Women Voters warrant article discussion. I'm BETSY DEWITT. I'm president of the nonpartisan League of Women Voters, whose mission is to educate voters. I will ask folks who are speakers as you join us to be muted, and when you come up on the agenda, you can unmute yourself to speak, please. I just would like to also say that we have only petitioners participating today, and I'm going to ask those speakers to please address any proposed amendments to the articles, and also if there are costs or expenses that are associated with implementation. The focus of our first group of articles is climate change and sustainability. The group is Articles 37, 24, 25, and 26. The town commissioned a report by the Collins Center at UMass Boston to make recommendations for climate action and sustainability in Brookline in 2020. And some of the information we will be hearing will be partly in response to the Collins report. So with that, I'm going to welcome Maya Norton, who is the petitioner for warrant article 37, a resolution for a climate action plan. For the record, the select board and the advisory committee have voted in favor, although I will say advisory committee had a mixed vote, and I'm sure there's an explanation for that, but maybe Maya will be able to answer questions. So Maya, you may be unmuted and share your screen.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to meet you and see you today. I will share a screen in a second, but I like to see everyone first, since once the screen sharing starts, it's hard to see your faces. So my name is Maya Norton. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the author and lead petitioner of warrant article 37 to declare a climate emergency in Brookline. So what I have found from doing this presentation several times is that the explanation of what climate emergency is and its importance is pretty straightforward for any of us who are paying attention, and I'm happy to fill everyone in on any information they want and are curious about. My speaking part will be relatively short, and then I would love to have questions and clarifications from anyone who would like to ask. I love that part of the discussion. It's my favorite part. So this is Climate Emergency Brookline, warrant article 37. Okay. So oftentimes we're hearing the terms climate action or climate crisis. No, those are old language and old terminologies. This is a climate emergency. In brief, and I'm happy to send anyone my warrant article and petitioner's explanation, because there's lots of background and citations that you can follow up with in really clear terms, but 3 main points. Climate emergency is a threat multiplier that scientists will say will lead to Earth's 6th mass extinction. Every part of the way we live is affected by the climate emergency, and all sectors will be affected by the shortages that we have coming, such as in gas, emissions, energy, industry, food, transportation, buildings, land use, anything you can think of, it's a factor here. Climate emergency declarations are relatively new. They started about 4 years ago. As of March 2021, and I imagine that at the rate they're growing, there's probably tens, if not hundreds of more in the last few months. There are nearly 2,000 climate emergency declarations worldwide. And in Massachusetts, we have at least 28. So you can see the towns here, the communities, the cities, the towns vary across populations, across geographies. It's not just coastal regions. We have inland, farmland, all kinds of communities are affected, and across all government structures. Newburyport, Northampton, Shrewsbury, and Watertown are some of the, along with Brookline, are some of the newest communities working on this spring and this fall. And overall, they've led to very positive results in mayor's offices and town councils. Especially, we see one of the strongest set of communities to come out for climate emergency has been the Cape Cod communities, because they're experiencing sea level rise in a way that is more tangible and more immediate than some of the other communities farther inland. Okay. The proposal, what warrant Article 37 asks, is clear. There's 4 main points: to declare a climate emergency with emergency response at emergency speed, creating an aggressive and strategic climate action plan, which reduces our net carbon emissions goal to 2040. Originally, at the moment, it's 2050, so we're trying to bring that down 10 years. And not only do we set a goal 19 years from now in 2040, but we ask of the community and the town to do everything that they possibly can in their power to bring it down earlier. The 2040 date is the last possible date that we think is reasonable. Now, oftentimes I'm an activist for climate and racial justice, and oftentimes we see those communities separated. Climate action is seen as something that the Green Movement has done, and the environmental action historically has been centered on white populations and those with more resources, while those who experience the effects of climate emergency are often Black and Brown communities, low-income communities. Those are called sacrifice zones. It is my deep and stringent belief that no human is a sacrifice, that we are all in this together, and that what the principle of just transition is asking, it's a principle that's been around since the early 1990s, and it means that all parts of the community who are involved in, who are affected by climate emergency, which is all of us living on Earth right now, that we include and center those with the least resources with as much importance as those with the most resources. Lastly, and closely connected to the crisis action plan, is a mandate to invest in public education and action. In 2019, Brookline had its first full-time climate person as the staff of the town. And during the year that person held office, it was Zoe Lynn, who just ran for select board. Brookline had its first climate action summit. Created out of that summit were strategic working groups working on specific projects throughout the year on climate action and setting these targets together. And that fall 2019, we had 11 climate action articles come to town meeting, which was the most that we had ever had exponentially. So just to be really clear about this, since initially there was some confusion, Brookline does do climate reports and climate action plans every few years. It started as 10 years apart and then 5 years apart, and now it's closer to 3 years apart. None of these things are asking for duplicative action. They're all learning and growing from the strengths we have established as best practices and what we've done well in Brookline with the tremendous community resources we have. Most importantly, the people we have working on climate action and high levels of education and investment makes Brookline really, really special. But it's asking us to work strategically together, setting priorities as a town, and all of the environmental groups, of which we have so many, including Mothers Out Front, Climate Action Brookline, Extinction Rebellion, Climate Elders, Climate Action, Climate is Everyone's Business, Sunrise Brookline, etc. You can see how many people are already care and are already working hard on this. And it's asking that instead of doing those things separately, we do them together. We set our plans together, we center our targets together, and that all the time, those who care and are working on this are working together with the town to push these things forward and making sure that we're really making fast action on this. So I thank you so much for listening. I welcome anyone to reach out to me at any time. This is my email address. I'll also put it in the chat if it is enabled. And I would love to hear your questions.
The chat is enabled, and I apologize. I should have said at the opening that we were inviting people to put questions in the chat, but I can also say to folks who have joined us, if you have a question, at the bottom of your screen, there is a little thing that says reactions. And if you click on that, it'll show where you can put a hand up. So if you have a question and you want to do that and indicate, it'll be on your screen showing that there's a hand up to ask a question, then we'll be glad to take your question. And I apologize for not having mentioned the chat questions first.
And I did mean to mention one more very important sentence at the beginning. I wanted to thank Betsy and Carol and Ernie for the essential work they do with League of Women Voters and all of its other members for encouraging and promoting civil discourse in Brookline and for educating our residents. I think it's such an important service, and it's truly important to what the community is trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. And I don't see any hands raised at the moment, and I don't have a question in the chat. So given that we do have a number of other items coming up, what I will say is that this is not the only warrant article that will come before town meeting with regard to climate action. And I know that the town is giving this topic quite a lot of attention. So we will move to the next issue or next topic on our agenda, which is the.
Can I make a comment? Sorry.
Sorry.
I did raise my hand, but.
Sorry, Clay. I didn't see you, Claire. Speak.
Yeah.
You know, you have the floor. Speak.
So I don't so much have a question as I just want to thank Maya for bringing this up. This is something that many of us in town have been talking about and for quite some time, and the hard work she put into this is really amazing. So I want to thank her for that. I'm a member of the board of Greater Boston Physicians for Social Responsibility. So this is one of the issues that we deal with all the time. From a whole array of things like opposing compressor stations and that sort of thing. But thank you, Maya.
And I'm going to say also, League of Women Voters is also very much in support of most climate action proposals. In fact, I was in a workshop yesterday, just was reviewing all of the matters before right now, the Massachusetts legislature that are pieces of legislation having to do with different components of climate action and sustainability. And I was quite astonished at the number of them. I was a little disappointed in the fact that many of them had not yet been enacted, but we'll continue to monitor actively. Anyway, thank you very much, Maya. And if there are other questions that come up in the chat, we'll share them with you. Okay, folks. Now we will move to the next item, which is Article 24. This one is you could think of pretty straightforward. It's appointment of a position in the town's planning department. And we are fortunate to have with us Allison Steinfeld, the Director of Planning and Community Development, who is speaking on behalf of the Select Board, who are the official petitioners. This is to create a position as Assistant Director for Sustainability Planning, and the advisory committee is in favor of this. And so, Ms. Steinfeld, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Betsy, and good morning to everyone. If I could just take 1 minute and thank Maya for her resolution. I'd like to think the planning department was a fairly early supporter of this resolution. Maya and I had some conversations and she agreed to make some adjustments. I think, and I hope Maya agrees, that what the town is doing, particularly relative to Article 24, is in perfect harmony with the resolution. Maybe Maya will speak a bit later, but in terms of Article 24, Betsy's right. It's essentially a housekeeping article. It proposes to formalize the creation of a sustainability planning division within the planning department and to create an assistant director to oversee that division and lead that division. This approach was already approved by town meeting, which authorized funding for an assistant director of sustainability planning. So warrant Article 24 just amends the bylaw establishing the planning department to reflect that decision by town meeting and to make the planning department bylaw, sorry about the phone, consistent with the budget organizational structure. But I'm sorry. It's someone asking for money, actually. But this is actually far more than a housekeeping matter, in that the establishment of a new division reflects the importance that sustainability the importance that the town places on addressing sustainability and addressing climate action. or as Maya said, the climate emergency. This commitment has grown steadily over the years, basically over the past decade or so, as have the municipal resources committed to implementing that commitment. So just to give a little background, about 10, maybe 12 years ago, the town created a senior planner position within the regulatory division of the planning department. The regulatory division implements land use regulations and bylaws and statutes. 50% of the senior planner's position focused on regulation, but the other 50% focused on climate action. That 50% was paid for through Green Communities grants. So the town was only paying for 50% of the position. As the town's commitment to sustainability as well as the climate threat increased over time, the town administrator and I created a sustainability program administrator position. And that's the position Maya was referring to, and the former candidate for select board, Zoe Wynn, filled that position. That position was placed within the Economic Development Long-Term Planning Division. It was 100% funded with town funds and focused exclusively on sustainability. So we're making progress. We filled this position in 2019, and the new sustainability program administrator did a number of exciting initiatives to advance sustainability, and that included the summit, the Sustainability Summit, establishing and coordinating the working group construct, and coordinating extensive town resources to support a petition warrant article, former Article 21, that sought to require fossil fuel-free infrastructure in new construction and substantial rehab. However, the incumbent resigned for any number of reasons after 8 months. So I'm almost done. The town administrator, the economic development director, and I took a few steps back and tried to address the town's approach to sustainability and its place within the organizational structure of the town. And the town administrator hired the Collins Center, which is affiliated with UMass Boston, to do an objective analysis of the situation. And the number one recommendation of the Collins Center was to establish a sustainability division within the planning department and create an assistant director position to oversee the division. We in fact did that. Kara Bruton and I, the economic development director, created a job description, brought it through HR, the HR process, and got it approved. And that position was funded by last town meeting, effective January 1, 2021. And our goal was to fill the position in last January, a few months ago. It took a little longer than we had hoped, but the position is now filled. And it's filled by a man named Tom Barrasso. He's just finishing his second week. He has a science background and decades of experience in the private sector and in all levels of local government. His first focus, and something he's been doing for the last 2 weeks aggressively, is meeting the players. Certainly that involves town department heads. He hasn't formally met the new select board yet. Obviously, it will take a little bit of time to do that. And he will be involving and engaging the stakeholders. His other, basically simultaneous priority is to create a strategic plan. Now, we already have a climate action plan. So the strategic plan is going to be based on Tom's experience, his knowledge, the input he's gained from the stakeholders with whom he's talking, and our climate action plan. It's not going to be a detailed plan. It's not going to be elegant. From my perspective, it can be 1 page. I don't care. But it's going to list the priorities and some basic timeframes to address those priorities. Because quite honestly, we want to get things done. I don't want to spend time preparing a plan. We're on our way. And I never want to miss an opportunity to, in a public forum, to thank Kara Bruton. Kara is our Economic Development Long-Term Plan, head of our Economic Development Long-Term Planning Division. Obviously, she has an extraordinary number of responsibilities relating to economic development, and those responsibilities expanded significantly during COVID. She and her one planner, Meredith Mooney, have provided extraordinary support to our business community during COVID. But Kara continued to maintain a lot of the sustainability initiatives, and she's continuing to train Tom as well. So I just want to thank her for her extraordinary work. I won't even address what she does for the town in terms of economic development. So back to the warrant article. It's a simple warrant article. It's just basic housekeeping, inserting a new division and creating a new assistant director. But it represents a major step forward by the town to create a management position fully funded and by municipal funds and exclusively focused on sustainability. And I hope at some point that you will, once Tom gets his footing, maybe you would extend him an invitation, Betsy, to talk to the league. I think
That would be a great idea. And I don't know if you have to leave right now, Allison, but our next warrant article, in an interesting way, begins to address some of those things. And I will leave it to Lisa to comment, but it would be very helpful for you to be with us if you could give us your thoughts, because it's about actually trying to apply some new policies that are in fact addressing the whole issue of climate action. So it's the fossil-free fuel warrant articles.
Yes, the planning department is very familiar with warrant articles.
I'm sure you are.
The petition we work closely with, but I would love to stay. I'm going to stay for a few minutes, but I do have a 10 o'clock.
Oh, okay, sorry. What I will say then, and maybe you can maybe you can just comment quickly. The Attorney General's office ruled that the first batch of fossil-free warrant articles were not in compliance with state law. I have no idea what specific violations or conflicts there were, but I did hear from my league folks that there are a number of pieces of legislation being discussed in Massachusetts that might begin to address this. Are you aware of any movement that would help unresolve these conflicts that have occurred?
The state is moving forward, certainly not as quickly as Lisa,
Right.
the other petitioners I would like. I think they're moving forward in part because of Brookline's efforts on warrant article 21.
Right.
Wasn't successful in terms of actually implementing law, but I think it encouraged other communities as well to start addressing fossil fuel free. So there is action. I know the petitioners and certainly the town don't want to wait for town action, but I think the town is focused as well on supporting and encouraging town state efforts, particularly now that we have Tommy Vitolo representing the town.
Yes, right. We have a loud voice.
Yes,
Okay.
a loud and strong voice.
Thanks very much, Allison. Appreciate
everyone.
being here. And obviously we can look to you for answers as we go forward in the future, maybe in a different session. So we'll move on now to the next warrant articles, which are 25 and 26. And as we previously mentioned, these are both addressing fossil fuel free development, but they are also revised in order to accommodate objections that came from the Attorney General's office. And our speaker is Lisa Cunningham. She is the lead petitioner and presumably is also knowledgeable about what it was that was turning off the Attorney General's office. So Lisa, welcome. Unmute yourself.
Today, I'm going to be presenting warrant articles 25 and 26. And this is, as Allison just mentioned, this is a result of the Attorney General's suggestion that we look for other ways to implement our original warrant article 21, which we passed with overwhelming support in the fall of 2019. The Attorney General said that our original bylaw was preempted by state law, by state building code law, utility and gas law. but she suggested that we could use zoning as a mechanism with which to pass the law. And that's what we are attempting to do in these two warrant articles. So we know that we need to reduce our emissions by 50% in 7 years, or by 57% by 2030. There's the little CO2 clock ticking along, and we really don't have time we don't have much time left to avoid what the UN, United Nations International Panel on Climate Change characterizes as avoiding the most catastrophic effects of climate change. So right now, the status quo is not the conservative path, because what we're doing is we're installing fossil fuel infrastructure that needs to be removed far sooner than its expected life expectancy. So Allison mentioned that that the state has passed a climate bill. Also, their decarbonization roadmap calls for 1 million buildings to be retrofitted by 2030. However, there is no political path forward to achieve this goal. And worse, we continue to put fossil fuel infrastructure into buildings that will need to be immediately retrofitted. Again, back to the climate bill. The climate bill is exciting and we're happy about it, but unfortunately it will not get us to our shared goals because the utilities are working hard and the other special interests are working hard to keep fossil fuels in the building code, the use of fossil fuels in the building code. And that is one of the reasons why we have to move urgently at the municipal level to try to enact this type of legislation. So I'm going to start with warrant article 26, but both warrant article 26 and 25 are again a direct response to the AG's suggestion. She suggested a zoning bylaw, and she just suggested something less than a mandate. 26 is to pilot a broader solution which would involve special permits. So I'm just going to go over the history quickly of our original warrant article for those of you who may not be familiar with it and what we've been doing in Brookline. So in December 2019, we passed a fossil fuel prohibition, which prohibited new fossil fuel infrastructure in new construction and major renovations. After that, we had a number of towns and cities come to us and wanting to follow us in this legal pathway. That resulted in a statewide building electrification campaign, partnering with the Rocky Mountain Institute, which is a premier national think tank. We got 17 towns and local towns and cities to join us. And we started in June of 2020, right after the pandemic had hit. In July of 2020, the Attorney General overruled our warrant article, but embraced our policy. And as I said before, suggested an incentive approach. And we came up with a couple of legal pathways. One of them was passing a home rule petition, and one of them was enacting zoning regulation, just zoning incentive bylaws. So in December of 2020, we passed, again, overwhelmingly, a home rule petition asking the legislature to grant us permission to implement our original warrant article. And we now have 7 towns and cities following us. 2, Arlington and Lexington, have actually already passed their home rule petition, and there are several more in the pipeline for this spring town meeting and beyond. So this, now the new article that we have before us proposes to implement the same fossil fuel policy that we've already voted on. So this is our 3rd time coming to town meeting with this, basically the same policy in May of 2021. So just to remind everybody, as I said, our 2019 bylaw prohibited the installation of new fossil fuel infrastructure in buildings It applied to new construction and significant renovations. And that meant basically gut renovations, over 50% floor area for commercial, over 75% floor area for residential. We were the first bylaw outside of California to be passed, the first in a cold weather climate, and the first to include building renovations as well as new construction, because the logic is that actually when you're doing a major renovation and you are also replacing your heating system, it is like new construction, and that is when you should be doing this. This is low-hanging fruit. And we also had an extensive exemption and waiver process set up. So we exempted things for practical things like backup generators. That is wrong. It's backup fossil fuel generators, cooking appliance, domestic hot water from buildings with more than 10,000 square feet, laboratories and medical facilities, and then also projects may be granted waivers due to financial infeasibility or impracticality. So that's just some background on our original warrant article 21. And we are basically using the same parameters as our original warrant article 21 for both warrant article 26 and 25. So what warrant article 26 says is that we have a process set up in the town whereby projects that are seeking relief from the town and many other major building projects are required to get, are not required to, may seek a special permit from the town and go through an established process where they go before the planning board and the zoning board of appeals. And so what our new process, our new warrant article is proposing is that when you go to apply for a special permit, you may get a special permit. When you apply to go for a special permit, you are applying to go for another reason. It's not because you have to go fossil fuel free. It's because you are seeking relief to do something that is not as of right by the town. So when you go to get a special permit, you have an architect, you've hired an architect, you've hired a lawyer for the type of project that we're talking about, new construction and gut renovations. You are spending thousands of dollars just to go through the process itself. And you're not going specifically for fossil fuel free infrastructure. But if you are going for a special permit, you will now have a choice of getting a special permit if you comply with the parameters of our original bylaw, more or less. It's more or less the same language with some little tweaks. And you will also have the same possibility of presenting, of getting a waiver from this requirement by presenting facts to the planning board that would show that you have some kind of technical, financial, infeasibility or impracticality. So your choice would be if you are a new building or rehab and you have a requirement of you're going for a special permit, then you have a choice to build fossil fuel free or get an expiring special permit. And if you choose not to get an expiring special permit, instead of going fossil fuel free, your special permit will expire in the year 2030 or within 5 years. Or in 5 years, sorry, whichever is sooner. So our old warrant article 21 actually was applicable to all building permits. This, because it's a zoning bylaw, will only be applicable to building permits that are going through the special permit process. Let me just go to the next slide. We already have expiring special permits in Brookline. These special permits will be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. The property owner will be notified before expiration. And upon expiration, the special permit may be extended on a yearly basis. And if the fossil fuel infrastructure is removed, the ZBA can make that permit permanent. That permit permanent. So again, that's what as I've already gone over, it's the same policy provisions as we've voted on twice in town meeting in 2019 and 2020. It's just basically a different implementation. And so while we are not getting as broad a scope as we would have with every building permit, we are still getting a broad scope of buildings. And just to reiterate, these are not small projects that are affected. These are large gut renovations when people, and also only when people are changing their heating system already.
Lisa, I'm going to have to ask you, please, to conclude. If we want to have questions, we're going to run out of time.
Okay, let me just skip to warrant article. Those are just our votes right here. Very positive. And that slide hasn't been updated. We had unanimous from CDICR and Green Caucus and Climate Action Brookline. And should I just go on with 25, or do you want me to stop with questions and then go to 25?
Well, I think what I'd like is to find out if the 25 is specific to the Emerald Island District, but basically the requirements are identical, aren't they?
They are identical, with the one exception is that they are for new construction only, because that's the only type of construction that can be done.
So I think, given that it's very specific to particular pieces of property, unless there's something in 25 that is different compared to 26, and 25 is in effect site specific to that. Yeah. All right.
I can just show maybe 3 slides on this. The Emerald Isle Special. So here is the Emerald Isle Special District. This is the site of the new hotel that was just built on the corner of Brookline Ave and Route 9. And basically, in order to apply to get a special permit and be qualified for building a larger building in this parcel, you actually have to combine parcels. You have to have a 13,600 square foot lot, which the hotel that was built did do. This is just showing that basically big buildings are being built today. Examples, lots of them, and they're being built for a negligible cost premium. These are actually net zero buildings, which is a higher bar than fossil fuel free, but they are being built. And this is an example of this is the Hilton Garden Inn that was built. And this is an example of what we could have had instead. We could have had the Hyatt Centric Hotel, which is already open for use in Boston, or we could have had the Samuel's Associate Parcel. These are both fossil fuel free hotels in Boston. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I apologize if we've tried to push you to go quickly. And I know these are complicated. I guess where I hope there is some understanding is these items, or I should say these requirements, have been previously discussed. So it's not brand new information to everybody. But I would like to be able to have folks ask questions. Now, I haven't seen anything in the chat, but if you have a question and would like to raise your hand, click on the reaction box down in the bottom of your screen, and it says raise hand. And then I'll try to make sure I see your hand on your screen, which I apologize for missing with Kea earlier. But what I do want to say is that these will be discussed again at town meeting, very important. And I hope that everyone who is participating understands that these 2 warrant articles at the moment are applying to major construction, which is to say, if you are repairing something in your home, or maybe replacing a modest, I don't know, putting in a new dishwasher or something, you're not going to be required under these 2 warrant articles. That's correct, Lisa, right?
That's absolutely true. You have to be, well, first of all, in both cases, you in the Emerald Isle, you have to be in the Emerald Isle and doing a very large project. And you, in the case of warrant article 26, you have to be going for a special permit for another reason. You have a choice of building by right or going for a special permit. If you go for a special permit, then you are not going for the reason of going fossil fuel free. You're going for another reason. You've already got professionals. You've already decided to go through this process. But as part of this process, you will have a choice of going fossil fuel free or getting an expiring special permit. But these are very large projects, even on the residential side, usually costing upwards of $1 million. So they're not for you're doing your kitchen or putting on an addition on your house. It's basically a full-blown gut renovation where you're not able to actually live in your house while you're doing it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Lisa. We really appreciate your being with us and explaining these. And I'm sure people at town meeting will have many more questions to ask.
Thank you so much. And I also just wanted to thank Allison and the planning department for their hard work on this, and also Maya for bringing forth her warrant article. It's a great group to be in. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for having me here today.
Well, we're all on that. I think we're all interested in this for the same reasons and hoping things can be moving forward. So it also seems to me you require a lot of patience to get to wherever our goals are. However, time to move on. And the next item is warrant article 40, which is a resolution in support of the Brookline's local public broadcasting medium. The warrant article petitioner is Dan Saltzman, and I'm sorry, I'm losing track, but I think I see Dan.
Hello, I'm here.
On the screen. Yes, welcome, Dan.
And Bonnie Bastian also.
Oh, and your co-petitioner is Bonnie Bassett. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And just for the record, the select board and advisory committee and school committee are all in support of this article. And I should be, it would be inappropriate if I did not say that this program is being recorded and will be posted on BIG. So the League of Women Voters is also very much engaged with BIG. Dan, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. And Bonnie is actually going to start us out.
I'm going to start us out. Thank you.
Sorry,
Hey,
Bonnie.
everybody. Thanks for having us this morning. My name is Bonnie Bastian. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 5 and board member for Brookline Interactive Group. I'm here with co-petitioner Dan Saltzman to present this warrant article 40. We wrote this warrant article to begin a conversation in town about who BIG is, the enormous value they bring to Brookline, and what is possible for the future of the partnerships between the town and BIG. Next slide, please. I'm going to start with how BIG is funded. BIG is not a line in the town budget. We are a completely separate entity. The large majority of BIG's funding is the 2% of the 5% of per subscriber cable fees allowable under federal cable franchise law, while the other 3% goes to the town. Both the town and BIG are losing funding because of the precipitous decline in these cable fees due to cable cord cutters and streaming services. But BIG has been very proactive about addressing these issues, but it remains uncertain. Next slide. Warrant Article 40 is a resolution to ask the town to recognize BIG's essential work through a more formalized long-term partnership. We want to do this by creating a community media committee or a working group to aid in identifying potential stable funding mechanisms for BIG, review cable licensing, and leverage opportunities such as grants of location to cable companies. We want to explore future partnerships to utilize its resources and expertise for public benefit. Next slide. But I want to make sure that we also acknowledge the very generous $196,000 in emergency funds BIG received from the town in the early months of COVID, in recognition of all the work BIG did to keep the town running and the public informed and engaged. It was clear that this level of work needed from BIG wasn't sustainable without financial help. So we want to thank the town for that critical support in that moment. And now I'm going to pass it on to Dan.
Actually, we're going to show this video first.
Yes, show the video first. Sorry.
"2020 is the year of adaptation. for working together to make safe and local decisions as a community, for listening deeply and ensuring that all voices are included, for learning new ways to communicate. A year for protecting our democracy and voting. Not only did Big adapt to COVID by managing our community media center remotely, we gave you the tools to make sure that all Brookline voices are heard and amplified, that local decision-making was live on multiple streaming and cable platforms, and that local government and emergency alerts were publicly accessible, timely, and transparent. We didn't stop there. In 2020, Big services expanded like never before. We covered Brookline High School's 4-hour live drive-through graduation on our community cable channels, Juneteenth events on local porches, Black Lives Matter protests, and community dialogue, and worked with Steps to Success.
Brookline Interactive Group is an incredible community partner for Steps to Success. It is always willing to let the Brookline community at large know about our programs and how the community can support us. Another way that Brookline Interactive Group has really supported our work is directly with our students. Over the last few years, BIG has provided incredible programming by giving our students their voice. They work with our students on our Summer Connections program, teaching them digital media, and having this kind of access to democratic media where anyone can get their voice heard is an amazing resource. I'm very thankful that Brookline Interactive Group both sees the importance of amplifying our voice as an organization, but also amplifying the voices of our students.
We've had a new programming focused on seniors during COVID-19. Whether you're aging in place or seeking active living, watch BIG's daily curated content from Gentle Chair Yoga, Brookline Bees Sewing, Brookline Rotary, and Age-Friendly Cities.
They provide support for older adults and all times. But right now, it's especially essential. So they provide education in the medium and support in producing. It's an exceptional organization they are. All I hear about is what BIG is doing to help people communicate, to get news out, to get facts out, information out. Their services support the Brookline Community Aging Network, and they support all of our events and now much of the communication that occurs. I want to support BIG. I ask us all to support BIG because service in this world requires them more than ever. They are essential.
Working remotely, we secured reliable technology and partnered with the town of Brookline to train and support community leaders to live stream online over 500 live community events like issue forums and involving public health, small business, and school reopening information.
I cannot say enough about the support that we receive from the Brookline Interactive Group, especially, as the roles and meetings in the public sphere have evolved since the onset of COVID-19. I think, one of the first people that I spoke to in the second week of March was Kathy Bisbee, and all I remember is her offering her unwavering support. I can say with 100% confidence, we would not have been able to transition to remote public meetings safely without fear of Zoom bombing or, insecurity with the meetings and being able to provide access to the public to be involved in that dialogue, especially during that kind of critical state of emergency time without BIG support.
Brookline Interactive Group was there for every minute of community decision-making, as always, and in expanded new ways. Our expanded work assures that Brookline's public process is 100% transparent and publicly accessible to all through our independent community cable channels, live streaming, social media, and archived community content online. Unfortunately, BIG's critical coverage may not survive without your support. Even as BIG expands its public media mission, we are losing over $125,000 in 2020 to 2021 from our main funding source of per subscriber cable fees and our ability to generate income for our in-person facility use and classes. We need your support more than ever. Donate now or become a member at brooklineinteractive.org/donate. Thank you for your support.
Okay, so thanks, Bonnie, for the beginning of the presentation. I'm Dan Saltzman. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 6 and BIG's board chair. And I also want to thank the League for allowing us to present this morning. We appreciate it very much. We just saw how much good BIG does for the community. And this slide is an overview of all of BIG services. BIG doesn't just televise public meetings. There's so much more to it. Trainings, community engagement, and media collaborations, member content, really just so much more. Here you can see that BIG tripled their total content delivered in 2020 versus 2019. This level of content is not going away. As the public has adapted, this really is the new normal. For example, hybrid meetings are already being codified into law in states like California, and we see no sign of slowing down here in Brookline. And of course, Brookline continues its movement towards greater government transparency, and BIG is instrumental in facilitating this movement. Here's a graph showing the breakdown of BIG's diverse content. Programming is only a quarter government content, and that's an important quarter, no doubt. But BIG's programming really touches all aspects of community life in Brookline. BIG has been recognized in so many ways over recent years. Last year, the Brookline Arts Commission awarded BIG the 2020 Cultural Producer Award. BIG representatives were flown to Kenya in 2017 and presented on virtual reality at the United Nations Environmental Assembly. BIG is truly a regional and indeed a national leader in community-based local media. And I'm not going to go through all the awards on this slide, but it's an impressive list. BIG really is a leader. So in 2019, 2020, we saw the beginnings of income diversification for BIG. Delivering all this content that we've just heard about and doing all the things that we do, it costs money, of course, and especially at the level that we expect here in Brookline. So a year ago, while cable revenue was certainly still the majority funding source, BIG had made moves to begin bringing in other sources of funding. But COVID really was a huge setback. When the pandemic hit, BIG's income diversification was really all but sidelined. 93% of funding in fiscal year 2021 came from the cable companies. So in this slide, you can see BIG's projected losses as a result of this. The funding from cable companies is in deep decline. Revenue from Comcast is declining by 12.5% annually. Again, this is all from the cord cutters and streaming services. And RCN revenue is declining annually by 14%. So we really have to plan, we have to act, we have to figure this out. Before COVID, we had a plan, recognizing the need to adapt and change to the declining cable revenues. Pre-COVID, plan was formulating. BIG recognized the end of the traditional funding. BIG advocated on local, regional, state, and national reforms to enhance cable company funding. And BIG grew its non-traditional funding model. BIG expanded the board, expanded staff capacity. BIG even started the public VR lab. This was the first publicly accessible VR lab in the country, and presented on this topic to the United Nations in Kenya. But then the perfect storm, COVID. So COVID stopped BIG's ability to grow new sources of funding. These funding sources included customary fees, workshops, classes, grants, paid after-school programs, and more. It halted BIG's ability to research, advocate, and consider new ideas. Strategic planning was really all but put on hold. At the same time, we saw a 200% increase in community demand for BIG services and a 200% rise in costs operating remotely. And BIG is taking action this year to ensure the ability to meet community demand going forward. So BIG's added staff to cover the 3 times increase in community content, purchasing equipment, adding expertise to align with the new post-COVID landscape, and BIG's facility will reopen and continue providing curbside laptop and media making equipment to its members. So what does the future hold? The petitioners are asking the town to recognize BIG's work. As other similar organizations are closing or being bought out by large media corporations, BIG is filling the void for local media here in Brookline. We're providing expertise for the community engagement plan, amplifying Brookline's diverse voices, and through multiple platforms, BIG keeps Brookline informed and our democracy thriving. So what we're asking is for the town to recognize BIG's work by first aiding BIG in identifying stable funding that is not dependent on the local cable subscriptions or the legacy cable subscriptions. We're asking to explore future partnerships with BIG for the benefit of all of Brookline and establish a new community media committee a committee is needed to study these issues, to guide us into the cableless future, to help us figure out how we're going to survive and how we're going to keep it funded. We're asking you to support favorable action in Article 40. Go ahead, Betsy. Sorry.
We're running late, but
We're
thank you
done.
very much, Dan.
Yep.
Can we unshare screen and see if there are questions? I don't see any in the chat, but again, people who are have joined us online, if you go down to the reactions box, you can click and raise your hand. And I'm just going to add, speaking personally, I've known Big since it was BATV a million years ago when it was first founded and came to Brookline. And I can attest that it has been a very active community partner in many, many ways. And one of the things we informally were discussing at the very beginning of this gathering, and I've had this conversation multiple times, is going forward. Clearly, life is going to be a hybrid version of in-person events and remote events. And to the extent that remote events that are recorded and then available for people to draw down and take advantage of as a recording, that means Big's role may very well be more significant in terms of public record keeping and I would say public access in ways that was not as true before we've gone through this current pandemic experience. Anyway, I don't see any hands up. So I'm going to thank Bonnie and Dan both and the Big staff for all that they've done and continue to do, and hope that town meeting will be equally supportive. Having said that, I shouldn't have, because I'm nonpartisan member of the League of Women Voters, so it's a mildly personal statement. Anyway, thank you both, and we'll now move on to the next warrant article, which is 23, which is an amendment to the Affordable Housing Bylaw. And I would go on record with the fact that the Select Board and the Advisory Committee have both voted favorable action. Roger, you have the screen floor, whichever you like.
Thank you for holding your session and all your hard work that you do on all of these sessions. This article, warrant article 23, is being put forward by the Housing Advisory Board. It's part of a continuing effort to improve and strengthen the town's inclusionary zoning bylaw, which in very brief terms is a requirement for the developers of multifamily housing, now beginning as small as 4 units of new or project size housing based on an article that town meeting passed last fall, requiring an affordable housing related contribution from the developer, either in the form of one or more on-site affordable units, or in some cases, the payment of cash to the town's affordable housing trust. This article is somewhat technical, and I'm going to just go through at a fairly summarized level of what it does and why, without getting into the weeds, and entertain questions if you all have them based on what I'm going to share with you. So why do we need Article 23 now? There's basically 4 reasons. We're trying to do several things at once. First of all, our staff has made it very clear to the HAB that the current bylaw isn't quite aligned with the state requirements for getting locally generated affordable units onto the state subsidized housing inventory. This is important, of course, in relation to the fact that we need 10%, and we're right flirting with that threshold as we speak. Second reason is to reestablish income eligibility limits under our inclusionary zoning that will expire when the town reaches 10%. This is due to kind of a quirk in the current bylaw that goes back a couple of decades. As you probably know, what defines affordable housing, other than the physical unit, is the limit on qualifying households in order to be eligible to to receive that unit. The third reason is to strengthen the private developers' affordable housing compliance requirements in order to have the privilege of developing on some of Brookline's most valuable and very expensive land. So we're increasing the cost of doing that in terms of the affordable housing contribution, but we have to be very careful because since this is private development, it has to be financially feasible for the developer. And this is part of the technical part of the article where we don't demand so much that we, so to speak, kill the golden goose that produces the housing in the first place. And the final reason is to refine the inclusionary zoning requirements under this bylaw so that we can better serve a full range of low and moderate income residents. So very quickly on those four reasons, the aligning of the state, our zoning with state criteria to make our units be sure to be counted on the bylaw. This has to do with the DHCD, that's the state agency's housing unit, relating to the rents and sales prices as they relate to the unit size and the number of bedrooms and the monthly housing cost. This is a technical adjustment that actually puts the bylaw into line with the way we're actually doing it now anyway to comply with the state. I'm going to skip that rest of that slide. To reestablish income eligibility limits for the inclusionary zoning units when our housing inventory reaches the 10%. The current bylaw has a very rigid requirement in it, which might have made sense at the time, 20 years ago, that of the 15% of a project's size of the units that have to be affordable, right now it's absolutely prescribes that 10% of those units have to fit into one category of income, 80% of area median income, and that's 2/3 of the total. The remaining 1/3 has to not exceed 100% of the area median income. That whole requirement will expire when we reach 10%. So we absolutely have to come up with something that replaces that kind of a rigid income targeting regime. And we're taking advantage of this transition to actually improve the way the bylaw will target incomes of eligible buyers. And finally, strengthening the developer's compliance requirements while not jeopardizing the financial feasibility. What we're doing here is, in a very short way of describing it, we're reducing the baseline income limits that a developer has to deliver the units under. For example, for rental housing, the current requirement is that that renters have up to 80% of area median income. We're reducing that down to 50% of area median income so that it reaches a lower income category of renter that's eligible. That increases the costs to the developer for delivering under the inclusionary zoning bylaw. And we've retained, some of you may know the name, housing finance and marketing consultant Pam McKinney to create a financial model for the HAB and for this bylaw to confirm that we can make those additional cost demands on the developer without jeopardizing the feasibility of their projects. And finally, and this is a new feature of the bylaw, to refine the inclusionary zoning requirements so that we can better serve both low and moderate income tenants and residents in the case of those that purchase affordable units. The way we're doing that, and I'll just focus on the second bullet here, there's a new feature which would authorize the developer to make a supplemental payment into the housing trust fund, so that if the developer, for example, wants to develop a project that serves moderate income renters at 80% of area median income, rather than the baseline requirement of 50% of area median income, that would increase the developer's rent rolls because the affordable renters would be paying a somewhat higher rent. this feature of the bylaw would allow that, but in exchange for doing that would require the developer to make a one-time lump sum payment into the housing trust fund that is roughly equivalent to the increased rent and the reduced cost to the developer of producing that project. So in a short summary, the immediate needs that this bylaw addresses is the technical requirement to align our qualifying terms with the state formulas for counting on the SHI. And second, the immediate need is, as we reach the 10% affordable housing goal, to substitute new language that improves the income targeting feature of our inclusionary zoning bylaw. At the same time, this bylaw advances several housing policies that are very much favored by the Housing Advisory Board to allow differential income targeting for rental versus owner-occupied affordable housing. I didn't mention or get into this specifically in my remarks up to this point, but at present, part of the rigidity of our bylaw is that rental households have exactly the same income targeting as owner households. In the world of affordable housing, it's generally thought that rental targeting of income should be towards a lower range, somewhat lower range of household incomes, and owner or for purchase affordable housing, a somewhat higher range, but in each case, very much below the full market prices, especially here in Brookline. We're increasing the developer's required housing contribution. I've already mentioned that, I think, adequately, and finally providing a more flexible income targeting framework under which developers can fulfill their inclusionary zoning housing obligation. So that's a mouthful. There's quite a few things going on, wheels turning inside this bylaw, but the HAB thinks these are all both needed, timely, and just good affordable housing policy advancement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. And I'm going to ask you to stop sharing your screen, please.
Yes. Let me see if I
That's
do that part.
appreciate it.
Oh, here it goes. Yeah, I always have to remember where that red button is. Thank you.
And now I did not see a question in the chat. So again, I give our gathering people an option if you want to raise your hand from the reaction box. And I think maybe I see a live hand. Donna, would you?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for these wonderful presentations, all of you. My question is, how did your committee arrive at the 50% and the 80%? What were the criteria upon which you based those percentages?
Well, they are, first of all, Donna, thanks for your question. They're very standard benchmarks or thresholds in the world of affordable housing, and when one looks at all of the various programs that operate under affordable housing, 50% is the threshold for low income housing that the Housing Authority uses for tax credit purposes as well. And so for those that are, and therefore for developers that are in the business and have to understand these programs, those income levels are well established. 80% is the standard, again, very widely used, and among other places, it's the 40B, Chapter 40B standard for income qualification, where units that have households at 80 or below can be counted on the state's affordable housing inventory. So those are the bottom of the new ranges that we've established, but the actual numbers are well established in the field. I hope that
just to sort of underline, I think the significant here, or the significant difference here, is the lowering of the allowed income provides accessibility to a range of potential residents who might not have been qualified previously. So it's expanding and making it more available, making those units more broadly available.
That's kind of one of the key features of this bylaw, targeted especially at the rental where the reduction is most notable. On the owner side, which is a much smaller portion of the affordable housing activity in the town and beyond, we've actually increased that range. And in the fall town meeting, the upper end on the owner went up to 120, where it had been 100 before. So renter now is 50 to 100, or would be under this bylaw, 50 to 100, and owner 80 to 120.
Okay. Do I see another hand anywhere? Oh, Donna, you have another.
So demographically, what percentage of the people who would be eligible for this type of housing are renters versus owners?
I'm not sure I can give that to you off the top of my head in terms of census statistics, but the rental component of the town's affordable housing activity to date, is in the order of magnitude of 90% renter and 10% owner. There's just a handful of owner projects. One of the things we've heard in trying to have something for a full range, some kind of a program, is that there is this gap between the bottom of Brookline's very expensive market rate housing and the upper end of anything at all in the way of affordable housing. So some of the owner opportunity under our inclusionary zoning is now being expanded to at least address that, even if only for a handful of units. One of the key things I'll just mention in passing, inclusionary zoning, unlike almost every other affordable housing activity, doesn't involve any kind of public subsidy, taxpayer or otherwise. The entire way that the affordable units are created is what we call a cross subsidy, meaning that the project as a whole, the market rate units basically pay enough to enable the affordable units to be included in the project plan.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm apologizing to everybody, but for some reason we seem not to have succeeded in bringing the petitioners for our last warrant articles, which in general are to request feasibility studies for the development of affordable housing on two properties, the Newbury College property on Fisher Hill, and the second one is a town-owned parking lot on Babcock Street, which is in Coolidge Corner. But if we don't have a spokesperson, I don't guess we're going to discuss those warrant articles. So I'm apologizing to the folks who are present, and I certainly apologize to the petitioners. We'll try to figure out what happened and why we were unable to have them join us. But anyway, then I suppose we could take another question for Roger Blood if there is one. And if not,
Betsy?
Yeah.
If you'd like a very quick summary, because those two articles were involving affordable housing.
Sure.
The Housing Advisory Board had a public hearing.
Qualified to comment, I'd appreciate it. I apologize. I don't know quite what happened, but anyway, the two warrant articles are, as I said, they're looking to look at feasibility for affordable housing on two properties that I guess have the distinction of being town under the control of the town. So Roger, you want to comment?
Very briefly, and in fairness to the petitioners who would be promoting the article, the Housing Advisory Board had a public hearing and extended engagement with Deborah Brown as the petitioner. Betsy, you described the articles briefly. They are proposing to conduct targeted studies of the Newbury West parcel, number one. I think that's Article 39, which the town acquired under an override vote last fall. and the voters approved that article to acquire that roughly 3+ acre parcel for a study of a range of municipal uses. And affordable housing was on that list, even though it's not specifically a municipal use. The parcel is large enough to include more than one use. Deborah Brown's in the petition's article to study only affordable housing for the use on that parcel. The HAB acknowledged that this was a good goal and an appropriate aspiration, but that it would not be consistent with what the voters felt they were voting for a full study on the full range of possible uses, including affordable housing. So acknowledging the very good motives of the petitioner, the HAB felt, and it was a unanimous vote, that it wasn't appropriate to recommend action to study only one use of that parcel. On the I think it's Article 38, which was a similarly structured article to have a targeted study for affordable housing and only one use on the Babcock parking lot. Again, the HAB acknowledged, and in a rather lengthy statement, the positive reasons for the article itself being brought forward. The HAB recommended no action for I think the two reasons being that we are already several years underway into a similar effort to build affordable housing over another municipal parking lot in the village, the so-called Kent Station Street parking lot, as a pilot to determine how this can be done. And so it was kind of a question, should we be undertaking another specific study when we're working on already a pilot? And the other was that we are about to undertake something called a housing production plan, which is a more comprehensive undertaking where we are actually interviewing a consultant to look at the opportunities to produce housing on a whole range of specific locations in Brookline, which specifically includes the use of municipal parking lots and including the Babcock parking lot. So the HAB felt that that the objectives of Article 38 were already very specifically being focused on a commitment and funds that have already been allocated to study that in a larger context.
Okay, thank you very much, Roger. I believe Deborah Brown has joined us. Deborah,
Sorry.
you weren't with us. You need to unmute yourself in order to speak. You do it yourself. There's a little window in the corner where you click and unmute.
I'm sorry, I was doing a little bit of multitasking.
So we all are these days, Deborah. Welcome.
Thank you.
What I can say is that Roger, as you know, is representing HAB, was just summarizing the content of the two warrant articles, which we had described as a request for feasibility for affordable housing on those two sites. So you now have the floor and can speak to warrant articles 38 and 39.
Well, I mean, I'll be very quick, but here's what I want to say about warrant articles 38 and 39. They are studies. They are studies for us to ask the basic question, you know, are these particular sites suitable for building affordable housing? That's the question. And, you know, to my knowledge, you know, when I look at Babcock Street, when I look at Newberry College, I see sites that are very different than, you know, what I see over at Kent Street. I see a very different model in terms of who this housing would support. We have very little family housing in this town. And warrant articles 38 and 39 look to build that kind of family housing. And, you know, that includes seniors, that includes families with children, disabled people. But, you know, one of the things that, that I think is important is to also, in order to make these projects more feasible, and it may be something that we've already learned from Kent Street, is that you actually need an income buffer in there. And I'm also old enough to have remembered some of the war on poverty and how we just lumped certain classes of people into one property. And properties work best when you have diversity. And so the idea would be to not only have low to moderate income housing, but to potentially put some market rate housing in there. But again, that's what you get from undertaking the study. I mean, what would be the different outcome if you're actually looking at, you know, putting some market rate housing in there? How would that have a different effect? We now have the Community Preservation Act. What will be the impact there as well? And so there are factors and variables out there that when Kent Street was envisioned, it just wasn't there. But first and foremost, we have an affordable housing crisis in Brookline. The idea here is to figure out ways to at least begin to look at it. And Roger's absolutely right that, you know, there's a new move to update the housing production plan, but that housing production plan was finished in 2016. In that 2016 housing production plan, it said, let's look at municipal parking lot. Let's look at municipal properties for affordable housing. And it didn't happen. And had it happened, I probably wouldn't have introduced the warrant article. And so what you end up with is, when you sort of look at my timeline, it doesn't start in 2021. I started at 2016 when there was a statement to actually look at these properties. So if I go from 2016 to 2021, I'm already at 5 years. The way people are talking about doing this is to actually look at these properties after we finish Boylston, both Boylston. So now we're already maybe an additional 2 years in. So we could be talking about even just beginning a study an additional 7, maybe even as long as 8 years. If we're talking about building affordable housing, why would we add all of this additional time? These are, I mean, honestly, when I look at Newberry, I start drooling because, you know what? Let's put the housing in there. And I can't tell you how many people have said to me, we need to also put a senior center out there. Well, why can't we marry the two? These are not mutually exclusive. You know, we've got property out there now that's dormant that the DPW is using. Let's, you know, I'm just asking for us to use our ingenuity. And to the extent that you're saying it leapfrogs, it deviates from processes and procedures that, you know, are in place. My one pushback to you is, are they working for those low income and moderate income families that we need? We don't grow as a community if we're a town of have and have nots. We don't grow, we don't thrive as a people. You know, and I've heard Roger say this. I mean, that's what this gets at. And is it potentially going to make, does it potentially make people uncomfortable? Yes, but oftentimes, you know, that's what we ask of our leaders. That's what we're here to do. You know, is to do the study, to push the envelope. I'm not sure what they'll say. You know, they may say, yeah, you know, Newberry has XYZ going on. For all I know, you know, it's got issues with, you know, bedrock. I don't know. But, a simple phase 1 assessment will figure that out. We expanded the timeline also to, accommodate some of advisory committee's concerns that this was going to happen too fast. But, and I'm going to conclude with this. We build housing all the time, market rate housing. It is popping up all over this town. So if we continue to allow market rate housing to come up, and we know that, people legitimately say, we're crowding folks out, then where is the room for the affordable housing? Where's the, then we don't get to it. We will never get to it. And that's a shame because, this town started out as a middle income gateway community. You started out here in your apartment, you grew to a bigger apartment, and then you bought a house. Some people stayed in Brookline, some people moved to Newton and Needham. But it was that opportunity. And that's all I'm asking for is a study to allow this opportunity to continue for people. So thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Sorry.
Betsy, DeWitt, we need to talk. I've got, because I'm, yeah, we got,
okay.
Yeah, I'm cooking up something.
Okay.
You like it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Deborah. Sorry about the confusion, and I'm sorry you were late to join us. Are there any questions about the 2 warrant articles, 38 and 39 now? Well, I'm not seeing any. And I therefore thank you, Deborah and Roger, for being able to comment on the affordable housing component of it. And appreciate all of you for joining us for another one of our Friday morning sessions. We're going to take a few weeks break now. We will not be doing Fridays next week or the week after, and we're going to leave it up to town meeting to focus everybody's attention for public engagement over the next several weeks. But we'll definitely have something to talk about in the future, and we'll let everybody know when that will happen. So thanks to you all. We really appreciate your public activity and engagement, and we will be glad to follow up in ways if we can. So you can leave a note in the chat if you have something, a question that you'd like to ask. But otherwise, we now will conclude the League of Women Voters Friday morning warrant articles discussion. And thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.